Let's jump on to the second question. And Emily, I'm going to start with you this time. How do you think engagement influences how successful your county is in maintaining its sense of community?
You know, it is literally the way that you know that you are successful in engaging your community. If you're having meetings or trying to get input on a topic, a project, an initiative, and no one is showing up, it's why are you doing it? You know, you're either, and I think it's incumbent upon local governments to ask ourselves, you know, is it that this is the wrong thing to be focused on? Well, if you're focusing on it, it's probably a priority of your elected officials, right? So you have to assume that they are in touch with what the needs of the community are. So then the question is, well, then where are we failing to connect with our residents? And that's the hardest part. You know, you have to know the demographics of your community. You know, is it a young community? Is it an older community? And then, you know, you have to work really hard, and this is the hardest part, to design an engagement and communication strategy that covers the needs of the people who are really engaged, because they're going to show up and they're going to talk to their elected officials. They're going to, you know, reach out to staff directly, but to also recognize who's not engaged actively on their own, but really needs to be. So who's going to be impacted by this thing that we're doing, and they don't necessarily realize it, or they don't have the time to invest that others may have in really getting involved. And how can you put them in a position to add their voice to a process that that will have a really big impact on their life? And so that's sort of how we start any real endeavor that we begin, to sort of figure out, okay, how can we be successful in making sure that everybody who needs to be part of this or informed about this is, and it always looks a little bit different. And I think, you know, as virtualized as the world is right now, I think there's never going to be a time or a project where we won't also have to be hitting all the country crossroads stores and you know, popping up on trails to talk to the real users, the real impacted stakeholders in whatever it is that we're trying to do.
Do you have a policy that requires engagement or some form of engagement with your major capital projects or major policy initiatives?
We have, you know, it's not a formalized policy, but it is absolutely the practice of, you know, driven both by our elected officials and also leadership within the organization. That you know, we all, you know, as West Hollywood and Asheville, very highly engaged community. University of Virginia is in Albemarle County, and so we have a very engaged and highly educated population that expects to be informed and engaged in major investments. So policy initiatives, capital projects, there's a big expectation that we'll do those engagement processes.
So it's a high priority, and it really comes through clearly how strategic you are in thinking about what the policy or what the issue is, and making sure that you're being very strategic in your outreach to get to those populations that should be involved, or you want to maximize the opportunities to be involved.
Yeah, we had a project a couple of years ago where we were doing a small area planning initiative for a really ideally located intersection in the community that really was just begging for redevelopment. And everyone, the consultants and the people who were showing up to community meetings and staff were really talking about trying to engage millennials in wanting to live and work in this redeveloped area. And every single person we were talking to as we reflected on our engagement was over 60. And so we said, we really need to talk to millennials about what it is that would make them want to live and work in a redeveloped area. Because right now it's just a bunch of you know, non-millennials projecting what they think millennials want. And we really need to bring them into the conversation if we're going to be successful in that.
Excellent point.